This is a very important principle that I think gets lost to people who aren't Trinitarians. They seem to believe that the biblical definition of deity can apply to some being other than the one true God. And it appears to be that when we look at the Bible's definition of deity, a form of theos without the article, like it's used in John 1:1c, then to say that something is deity is to grant it identity with the one true God. And nothing else but the one true God has that form of ousia. Now, somehow humans, believers, are going to share in the glory of God, yes, but will we share in his divinity, like theosis? I'm not comfortable admitting that we're going to be sharing in that just yet. That sounds too Mormon to me, too close to Mormonism to me, becoming little gods. Point being, to say that in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was a little God, like the silly schoolboy Jehovah's Witnesses New World Translation version of the Bible, grossly misunderstands that the Bible does not recognize small God, where the word God is referring to the divinity that God himself possesses. Understanding my reference here? It's almost like if we could call the divinity that God possesses, if we could call it an ingredient that a being could have, we could say that the Bible is trying to portray this idea that God uniquely possesses this ingredient, and that the three persons likewise share in this ingredient, undivided, equally across the three. It's not that they have three equal shares, like 30%, 33.3%, or 33.3%, or something like that. That's not what I mean. It's rather they all have 100%. That's what I mean. However, what the Bible does seem to be saying is that this ingredient that I'm calling deity is unique to God alone. Everything lesser that could be identified as an Elohim or a theos in the Greek doesn't possess this same ingredient. It could be created in the image of God, meaning have the same, say, economic job description as God, to be bearers of the truth and to promulgate God's truth throughout the earth, things like that, meaning even humans have this role. But the deity, that an ingredient that I'm using an analogy, this ingredient, it seems to be unique to God. Okay, so this bears relevance to the claim that there's three gods, three little gods, that somehow all have this same ingredient. No, in the Bible, it's either or. If you have this ingredient, then you are counted among that which is recognized by the Bible as God proper. God either identity or God predicatively. But either way, nothing else seems to be able to have this ingredient or this quality. And so that's why we cannot say that there's three gods. There's no such thing as a little God that has this same divine essence that the one true God has. This is again why Jesus falls into the category, the Son of God has the category of true God, because he possesses this divine essence as well. Let's turn to a Trinitarian response to biblical Unitarianism. My name is Ariel ben-Lyman, HaNaviy. This is the final 30 minutes of our hour-and-a-half long study. The first hour is a study on end-time events, eschatology, a biblical study of end-time events. We talk about Book of Revelation topics. At the moment, we're looking at Mystery Babylon. And this next 30 minutes is dedicated to Trinitarian-type topics. We have been talking about this form of Trinitarian model that's labeled Monarchical Trinitarianism, or MT. And Dr. Joshua Sijuati is one of the more vocal proponents of this model of Trinity. Dr. Bo Branson is also a champion of this particular model. I myself have been studying this model for well over a year, but I've never really articulated it to my students until now. And so I've worked my way down through a paper that I wrote that outlines what this model looks like, why I'm embracing it, and my journey towards using this type of language going forward. But what I want to do now for you is begin to work my way down through what I call anticipated counter-arguments to monarchical Trinitarianism. Okay. For those of you who don't know what it means, let's see if I mention it in my notes. Okay. My first objection, it sounds like subordinationism. All right. Let's talk about this. But first, let me do this. I don't think I actually defined it. Well, maybe I did. Give me a moment. Let me just look back real quick. I talk about Sijuade's view of the Trinity. Summary. Let me see. What's the best way to define? I'm trying to find like a maybe just a very succinct definition of monarchical Trinitarianism. Let me just do it this way: monarchical Trinitarianism. I'm using right now at the moment on my on my computer. I'm just using the AI overview that's built into Google. If you were to Google search, and here's the definition given: monarchical Trinitarianism is a theological view emphasizing the Father as the sole monarch or ultimate source within the Trinity, while maintaining the Father, Son, and Spirit are one God, sharing the same divine nature. In this view, the Father is God in the primary or nominal sense, being uncreated and the ground of being for the Son and the Spirit. The Son and the Spirit are also God in a secondary or predicative sense, as they share the divine essence with the Father, but their existence is derived from the Father, not from themselves. Okay, so right away when you listen to it, if you are a classic, what I'm calling Latin Trinitarian or egalitarian Trinitarian, or just your standard social Trinitarian, and you're wondering, well, what are all those? Your basic Trinitarian that you find in your average Catholic or Protestant church. That's what I mean by all those other fancy labels. So if you're one of those, in other words, monarchical Trinitarianism isn't one of those. Monarchical Trinitarianism is more associated with Greek Orthodox forms of religion. So it's a Eastern Christianity, not Western, like as in Rome or Catholicism, but the church in the East. So right away, when you listen to the East's description, one of the first things that pops into your head is, aha, I see the flaw. The Son and the Spirit are God in a secondary or predicative sense. They share the divine essence, but their existence is derived from the Father, not from themselves. Sounds like you're lowering God, or you're lowering Jesus from the spot of being God, and therefore, this is the weakness of your model. In other words, you are teaching subordinationism. All right, that's the primary charge. So let's go back down into my study and answer that objection. It sounds like subordinationism. Now, what is subordinationism? Let's see if I can get a definition. I don't know if my dictionary here is going to do it. Nope, no results. Let's search with Google. Subordinationism. All right, here we go. Same thing like we did earlier. I'm using the little AI overview as an answer. Subordinationism is a theological doctrine within the Christian Trinity that states the Son and the Holy Spirit are subordinate to the Father in essence or being, not just in role. Notice that very important line right up front. So we're talking about ontological subordination. This view, subordinationism, was debated in the early church with proponents like Origen, emphasizing the Father's monarchy. However, Orthodox Christianity ultimately, when it says Orthodox though, even though it's got a capital O, it doesn't mean Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. It means Orthodox meaning that which is proper, that which is accurate Christianity, the kind that is worshipped, or the in terms of Trinity, the kind that is championed by most Catholics and Protestants. So that's what I mean by Orthodox, and Orthodox, by the way. But This article goes on to say, however, Orthodox Christianity ultimately rejected subordinationism, affirming the co-equality and co-eternality of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, a principle articulated at the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Okay, so going back over to monarchical Trinitarianism. If, according to monarchical Trinitarianism, like I mentioned earlier, like it says in this clause of this definition, the Son and Spirit are God in a secondary predicative sense, and they share the divine essence with the Father, but their existence is derived. Basically, we're making the claim that the Father and the Son don't share the same type of aseity. What is aseity, by the way? Aseity means, let's draw another definition. Give me a second. Aseity is, what? What do you mean? Give me a second. My little dictionary doesn't show, so let's pull it here. Aseity. We got to pull up all these little definitions. All right, this one. Aseity is, let me zoom that a little bit. Aseity, the quality of being, existing of and from itself, possessing absolute self-sufficiency, independence, and autonomy without dependence on any external cause or source. It is a theological concept primarily applied to God to describe a being that is self-derived, self-existent, and the ultimate origin of everything else. The term comes from the Latin phrase a se, meaning from self. Now, is God the only one that is a se? Or, Father is only a se, or do Son and Spirit also share aseity? All right, so let's talk about this. Subordinationism. Challenge. People might say, Ariel, Mr. Monarchical Trinitarianism, Mr. Monarchical Trinitarian, if you say the Father is the one true God and the Son and the Spirit derived from him, aren't you making them lesser beings or subordinate in essence? This is a valid charge in the sense that it's a valid concern, but it's not a valid charge if you misunderstand the heretical form, or at least heterodoxical form of subordinationism, like we just said earlier. All right, what's my response? No. MT explicitly denies that the Son or Spirit are lesser in essence. That's why I keep saying ontological essence, right? Their, speaking Son and Spirit, their full divinity is eternally derived, not created or caused in time. Let me just pause and let that sink in. Son and Spirit are eternal, just like the Father. There was never a time when the Son wasn't. There's never a time when the Spirit wasn't. Even though God is the arche, the monarch, the source, the Son and Spirit derive their eternal existence from the Father. Now you're saying, but Ariel, that's contradictory. No, follow me. The Son and Spirit receive their personal hypostatic distinction from the Father, but share the identical divine nature. Aha! That's how we articulate it without contradiction. Father is Father, Son is Son, and Spirit is Spirit. There's where we have our distinctions. That's where we see persons. But at the same time, we have this one undivided divine nature that is equal across the persons. No division, no diminishment. All right? Father, Son, Spirit all share in the same divine nature, undivided. Everything that the Father has in terms of divinity, the Son does. Everything the Son has in terms of divinity, the Spirit has, and everything the Spirit has in terms of divinity, divine nature, the Father has. So it comes right back around. So it's what we call perichoresis, interpenetration is what the Greeks call it, but I don't want to get into that just yet. So the full divinity is eternally derived. It's not created or caused in time. So when we call the Son begotten, right, monogenes in the Greek, it's an eternal begetting. And I realize that term creates tension because it's language related to the way parents have offspring. Begotten, right? I was begotten. I was begotten by my parents. They gave birth to me. My father and mother got together and here I am. That's how begetting works. Well, in the temporal sense, that makes sense. That makes sense. The temporal sense makes sense, right? Man and woman join together and out comes a baby. Well, in God's sense, that doesn't have to be because God's outside of the physics that we know. Remember, he's what do we call him? A rarefied object. The being of God is a rarefied being. He's a rarefied object. He is outside of the temporal time frame that we're aware that we know. So he doesn't need to fall into those. He doesn't have to share the same categories that we do as temporal beings. So the Son is uncreated, and yet he is begotten. It's part of his hypostatic distinction from the Father. In fact, it's in his label Son. Remember, I talked about this before. When we use the phrase analytic, it's analytic that a father must have a son. When I say analytic, I mean that the label father implies offspring. Otherwise, father doesn't make any sense. That's what I mean by analytic. Likewise, son implies parents. Otherwise, the word son loses its force of meaning. So, in the persons of the Trinity, Father and Son are unique. Father is Father, Son is Son. We don't confuse. And yet, we never stop to try to figure out why Son is called Son. Why can't we simply call the Son the Father? They share the same essence. They have the same ousia, right? It's a homoousios, one nature. True, Jesus is equally divine as much as Father is. The Son and Father share the same divinity. They have the same equal divinity. That's why Jesus can be called God in many ways. Also, he's representative of God here on earth. He's the visible representative of the invisible Father. He said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. The Father is invisible. No one can see him, but you can look at me, and there's nothing lacking in what you're seeing as if you were wishing to see the Father. You don't have to look past me to see something that I lack that the Father has. Everything the Father has, I have, except the term fatherhood. Other than that, you're looking at him, right? You want to see God? Look at me. So that's not to say that the Son and the Father are the same. They're not the same person, right? We don't confuse that. So they share in the identical divine nature. There is no difference in power, glory, or substance. The difference is in their personal mode of origin. The Father is unbegotten. Again, we're using origin there only for analytic sake, because we humans can't quite wrap our minds around eternality, right? Because we're finite beings. We can't fathom a being that has never had a beginning. We don't quite grasp eternity yet. One day we will, but for now, our language kind of fails us. And so when I say origin there, don't misunderstand what I'm saying there. The Father is unbegotten. The Son is begotten. And yet they're both eternal, right? The Spirit proceeds, or spirates is how the ancients called as in like a spiral. Spirals out of the Father. This is why the Father is called the source. But all three share one divine essence. That's not subordinationism, which would say the Son is ontologically inferior. So this charge is patently false because of the classical definition of the heretical or heterodoxical version known as subordinationism. Monarchical Trinitarianism does not suffer from subordinationism in that category. So rather, the divine essence that's shared is a relational hierarchy within co-equality. So in one sense, it's recognized that no matter which form of Trinity you hold to, no matter which model, you have to use the language the Bible gives us. Father, Son, Spirit. Even if you are a non-Trinitarian, you still recognize Father, Son, Spirit. You recognize those three persons, even if there's only one God. Even if you're a biblical Unitarian and you say the Father is the one true God and Jesus is a person who's fully human, he's still a separate person from God the Father, and he's still the Son of his Father. What's my point? My point is that this familial language of Father, Son, Spirit is biblical, and it's warranted, and you ready for the bombshell? At the base level of recognizing that Son submits to his Father, we have a form of subordinationism going on there. Maybe functionally, in terms of economy, in terms of salvation, history, Son submits himself to the Father in terms of willingly going to the cross, willingly submitting his will into the hands of the Father, explaining to people, it's not my will, but thine be done, right? We know he prayed that in the garden. Father, take this cup from me, but nevertheless, not my will. This is the Son admitting that the Father is greater. He said that as well. He said, the Father is greater than I. And this trips non-Trinitarians up. How can Jesus be God if he says that the Father is greater than me, right? Okay, so my point is that we don't need to run away from this term subordinationism unless we're always thinking that it's referring to ontological, and that's where it gets heretical or at least heterodoxical. Okay, so let's move on to the next objection. I don't know how many of these there are. I can't remember. But there's enough to keep us occupied for the next 15 minutes. Objection number 2. Well, they're not numbered, but you know what I mean. It sounds Eastern Orthodox, Ariel, not Protestant or biblical. I don't know if I want to be on board with this MT, monarchical Trinitarianism. Now, I'm being funny at the moment because I've heard internet people describe it as monarchical, and I've heard other people use the word monarchical. Is there a difference? Not really. They're both the same thing. It's just that I think from a scholarly perspective, monarchical is the one that's favored in scholastic circles. Monarchical is kind of the everyday street description of it, so don't get confused. But what often does happen is that non-Orthodox Christians, such as evangelicals and Catholics, they say, that sounds too Eastern Orthodox. I don't know if that's biblical. All right, here's the challenge. Some might say this is just an Eastern Orthodox doctrine. Why bring it into Protestant theology? All right, here's my response. It is true that MT is strongly championed in Eastern Orthodoxy, but its roots are entirely biblical. Yeah, that's right. This is why I am not uncomfortable embracing it. I'm not an Eastern Orthodox, and I have no desire to embrace Eastern Orthodoxy. All right, just wanted to let you guys know, I, Ariel, HaNaviy, am not converting to Eastern Orthodoxy. I am not Hank Hanegraaff, the Bible answer man. He did convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. Good for him. But that's not me. I'm not doing that. I'm comfortable being a Messianic Jew. I love being a Messianic Jew. All right, so the Bible itself portrays the Father as the fount or font or foundation. That's what that word fount means there. The fount of divine life, right? John 5:26, 1 Corinthians 8:6. There's actually a ton of verses to support this idea of the Father is the arche, right? It's not just these 2 verses. I just only brought in 2 or 3 just for a sample representation. But you go back, look those up on your own. So the Bible portrays the Father as the fount, the source. The Son is eternally begotten, and the Spirit is proceeding from the Father, right? John 15:26. These are biblical structures which the Cappadocians, remember that's Basil of, I think it's Basil the Great, Basil of Caesarea, and then we've got the 2 Gregories, Gregory Nazianzus and Nazianzus, however you want to write it, and then Gregory of Nyssa, I think those are the 2 Gregories. But either way, we've got 2 Gregories and a wow, who's the other guy I just mentioned? I just lost his name. Either way, so we got those 3 are the Cappadocians, the 2 Gregories, and the guy I just mentioned a second ago that now his name is gone out of my head. All right, that's okay. It's not that big of a deal. I'll flash it in post-production. So these guys are the Cappadocians. And they were some very instrumental church fathers. You know what? I can't resist. Give me a second.
The Cappadocians can refer to the Cappadocian Fathers, a trio of influential early Christian theologians: Basil the Great, Gregory of Nazianzus, and Gregory of Nyssa. Yeah, just the three I mentioned from Cappadocia and modern-day Turkey, who shaped Christian doctrine. It can also refer to the Cappadocian Greeks, an ethnic Greek community native to the region of Cappadocia. But note, I'm talking about the two Gregorys and Basil, not to be confused with the herb that I put on my pasta last night. Okay, just being funny. All right, so back to my little note here. We've got these biblical structures about Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Cappadocians simply gave them formal philosophical language. The Bible gives us the license to go in this direction. Protestants have sometimes neglected that aspect, but there's no such contradiction between being Protestant and recovering biblical patristic insights on the Father's monarchy. So let's keep going. Next objection. MT divides the persons too much and risks tritheism, right? Because of the focus on Father being the monarch and Son and Spirit deriving from the Father in some way. Too much division going on. I feel uncomfortable. All right, let's look at the challenge. Critics might argue, if the Father is the one true God in a special sense, then aren't you monarchical Trinitarians dangerously dividing the Godhead into three different gods? All right, let's look at my response. That's an important concern. All right, we always want to be concerned about how our language is true to the Bible. However, MT safeguards the unity of God precisely because the Son and Spirit derive their divinity from the Father, who is the one ultimate divine source. Again, when we're talking about deriving or derivatives, we don't know how the Father shares the divine essence with Son and Spirit. That's why I said fancy philosophical terms get introduced: interpenetration, perichoresis. Let's pull that one up because I know you guys are probably going, what? Perichoresis. There we go. Perichoresis is a Christian. Let me shrink that a little bit. There we go. Perichoresis is a Christian theological concept from the Greek language, referring to the mutual indwelling, interpenetration, and co-inhering of the three persons of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, within one another, while each retains its distinct identity and shares the same divine essence. This concept emphasizes the profound unity and eternal communion of God, often described metaphorically as a dance of love. So, perichoresis, or interpenetration. It's a mystery. I don't understand how Father, Son, and Spirit have the same essence and yet are distinct in person. So that's where mystery is retained. But what I do know is that the Bible gives us the permission to identify that Father, again, analytic. I'm going to look that one up so you guys know what I'm saying there. Analytic. All right. Relating to or using analysis or logical reasoning. Analytical, true by virtue of the meaning of the words or concepts used to express it, so that its denial would be a self-contradiction. Okay? Analytic or analytical. It's an adjective. So to say that the Father is not the Son preserves the personhood, yes, but it also preserves the basic meaning of the words. So how can Son be derived from Father? Well, in natural sense, we understand that. We're just simply taking the natural meaning of the word Son and applying it to the Godhead, the Trinity, but realizing that there are limits to this model, to this picture, because the Son eternally comes from the Father, eternally begotten, not temporally begotten. So Father, Son, and Spirit derive their divinity from the Father in eternity, who is the one ultimate divine source. That means their divine essence is identical with the Father's. You cannot get three gods because their deity is numerically one and undivided. This is a very important principle that I think gets lost to people who aren't Trinitarians. They seem to believe
that the biblical definition of deity can apply to some being other than the one true God. And it appears to be that when we look at the Bible's definition of deity, a form of theos without the article, like it's used in John 1:1c, then to say that something is deity is to grant it identity with the one true God. And nothing else but the one true God has that form of ousia. Now, somehow humans, believers, are going to share in the glory of God, yes, but will we share in his divinity, like theosis? I'm not comfortable admitting that we're going to be sharing in that just yet. That sounds too Mormon to me, too close to Mormonism to me, becoming little gods. Point being, to say that in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was a little God, like the silly schoolboy Jehovah's Witnesses New World Translation version of the Bible, grossly misunderstands that the Bible does not recognize small God, where the word God is referring to the divinity that God himself possesses. Understanding my reference here? It's almost like if we could call the divinity that God possesses, if we could call it an ingredient that a being could have, we could say that the Bible is trying to portray this idea that God uniquely possesses this ingredient, and that the three persons likewise share in this ingredient, undivided, equally across the three. It's not that they have three equal shares, like 30%, 33.3%, or 33.3%, or something like that. That's not what I mean. It's rather they all have 100%. That's what I mean. However, what the Bible does seem to be saying is that this ingredient that I'm calling deity is unique to God alone. Everything lesser that could be identified as an Elohim or a theos in the Greek doesn't possess this same ingredient. It could be created in the image of God, meaning have the same, say, economic job description as God, to be bearers of the truth and to promulgate God's truth throughout the earth, things like that, meaning even humans have this role. But the deity, that an ingredient that I'm using an analogy, this ingredient, it seems to be unique to God. Okay, so this bears relevance to the claim that there's three gods, three little gods, that somehow all have this same ingredient. No, in the Bible, it's either or. If you have this ingredient, then you are counted among that which is recognized by the Bible as God proper. God either identity or God predicatively. But either way, nothing else seems to be able to have this ingredient or this quality. And so that's why we cannot say that there's three gods. There's no such thing as a little God that has this same divine essence that the one true God has. This is again why Jesus falls into the category, the Son of God has the category of true God, because he possesses this divine essence as well. They are truly distinct persons, yet share exactly the same divine essence. It is tritheism, not monarchical Trinitarianism, that posits three self-originating gods. All right, and let me look. There's two more and a summary. I think I'll stop here. It's a good place to stop. I don't need to keep pushing this further. I'm not in a rush. We'll let this go on for another week. But I'll tip my hand a little bit so you can see it. The next objection we're going to look at next week is objection. Jesus is called, and notice there's capital G-O-D in my commentary. Jesus is called God in many places. How can you then say the Father alone is the one true capital G-O-D? We'll get into that next week. But that'll do it for a Trinitarian response to biblical Unitarianism.